I'm the mother of 11 children. I am very concerned about this justice system, and I'm concerned about the future because I do have children.
If there was a devil, if somebody was on the devil's payroll, so to speak, it would be Mr. Neely.
I am just angry.
We can't even go to our courts anymore for justice. What does America come to? Even when our public officials violate the law, if we can't go to the courts to find justice, what's left for Americans this day?
This one's for real. It started, my goodness, when it comes to the law and the courts, it really hasn't been a very good experience. The worst thing I ever had in my life up to a number of years back was a speeding ticket. I feel sorry and sad about how many lives this Commonwealth attorney, William F. Neely, has ruined.
He really doesn't care for her.
The history of this started back in 1993 or thereabouts when Herb was trying to expose the corruption in Spotsylvania County.
Well, I went ahead and filed a federal lawsuit against the county attorney, the assistant county attorney, the building official, the county administrator, and a board of supervisors. Basically, the whole civil side of the county.
By virtue of that, made himself a target of William F. Neely.
Now, when I filed this, I had gotten documented evidence from the county's offices. In fact, what I had done, the assistant county attorney tried to keep me from going into the offices. In fact, and I've got the documents, I could show you these. I've got letters and so on. I was recording things, so I went in the county offices recording all this stuff. And then what they did, they go into court ex parte with the judge, in other words, behind the scenes, to get an injunction to keep me from going into the county offices and saying that I was threatening, harassing these people. Well, later on, I think what happened, they found out that I'd been recording these people. So when I found out I'd been recording things, all of a sudden that injunction that they had, in essence, illegally went to the judge and what they were able to get, that was dismissed.
We got the public officials left and right violating their oaths of office right in front of our very eyes.
And so they ended up let me go back into the county offices to be able to see these records. Well, one of the records I was able to go through, I found out there was a little note having to do with my certificate of occupancy. On there's a little sticky note, and on it said, no occupancy if it passes. That even though it would pass, don't give me a certificate of occupancy. So this being done by the county attorney's office and these public officials.
William Neely used his office, his position in office, to persecute an American sovereign citizen.
So when I filed this lawsuit against them, I had it in federal court, and it probably was in a process from 1992 through 1993. I met with the FBI and state police. After meeting with them, he said, well, we will take it to the Commonwealth attorney, this William Neely of Spotsylvania County. And I said, look, you can't take it to him. That's their friend across the street. And I said, well, you can't do that. You need to take to somebody outside the county. They didn't listen, because 2 months later, I get a call from a reporter here with the Freelance Star here in Fredericksburg. Mr. Lux, I'd like to talk to you about these indictments. What indictments? He said, well, you were just indicted this morning by the grand jury. And I said, well, for what? So he goes ahead and explains that I had been indicted at the grand jury for 2 felonies, of which I faced up to 20 years each in the penitentiary. I called the state police, and I turned myself in, and there I was booked and so on for these false charges.
I'm afraid for any small person who tries to go into this courtroom for justice against powerful people.
And after looking at the charges, I've got the documentation, because the 2 charges was, one was a charge for allegedly defrauding, this couple of $2,500. Now the $2,500 I'd received was for a deposit on a home that I was building for them. Now I had built their home, So in other words, this is after the fact. So the $2,500 was prior to me building the home, which I ended up building. Well, the other charge was that I took a $6,200 construction draw and put it into my personal checking account and converted it to my personal uses. Well, the fact of the matter with that, the $6,200 went into my construction account. So I thought, well, we've got this covered both ways. I've got the documentation to prove it, and so all I need to do is have somebody to present that. Well, they assigned me a public defender. The Commonwealth attorney said if I don't make a deal here and make a plea agreement, they're going to bring a third charge. Well, of course, you know what I told them to do about the two charges there? It's like a long walk off of a short pier because I hadn't done anything. And the Commonwealth attorney ended up bringing a third charge, so I faced up to 60 years in the penitentiary. Well, the first thing I did when that attorney came, then we got together and talked to him, I said, look, you have got to be prepared for this trial because I said they're after me. Obviously, I've got a federal lawsuit against all of the public officials, and it's pretty clear what they're trying to do.
Who's the Commonwealth attorney?
Oh, the Commonwealth attorney was William Neely. Here's the Commonwealth attorney, brings a third charge against me, so I'm facing I'm facing 60 years in penitentiary. This John Bowers, which is the attorney that was supposed to be handling it for myself and my defense, he calls me on the phone and he says, Mr. Lux, he says, we need to get a continuance. And I told him, I said, that's not going to happen. I already told you that. I said, you need to be prepared for the trial. He said, oh, no, they know me. He said, well, I'll get on the phone with the judge and the Commonwealth attorney, William Neely. He says, that's not a problem. I said, well, you're not going to get a continuance. They had actually called in a retired judge to hear this case. What they were doing all along when I had these actions that I was coming in court against these officials, the regular sitting judge ended up not handling them, and he would call in a retired judge because apparently they didn't want to get their hands dirty. Well, at this day when he was going to call on the 7th of January, here's this retired judge, Selwyn Smith. Well, he gets him on the phone, gets the Commonwealth attorney, William Neely, on the phone, and I get on the phone, and he's asking for a continuance. He says he's not prepared for the trial, which is coming up. Now, keep in mind, I'm facing up to 60 years in a penitentiary. What does the judge do? Mr. Neely argues against the continuance because he's got witnesses. The judge doesn't grant it. The trial's going to go forward on Wednesday. Well, how many witnesses do you think he subpoenaed for me? Well, the attorney had subpoenaed 0 witnesses. He's selling me down the river right off the bat, and that's why I asked to talk to the judge. Once you're put in jeopardy, once a witness takes the stand, they cannot change the charges. And that had happened all along. They would change the charge. Mr. Neely had done that, I don't know how many times he had changed the charges. But once you're put in jeopardy and put on the stand, the first witness, I should say, is called, and they start giving testimony, then you're in jeopardy. They can no longer play games. The charges are the charges, and they have to deal with them. And I talked to the judge, trying to let him know that we have to get a continuance because this man's not prepared for the trial. And the judge, he says to me, Mr. Lux, this trial is going forward today, either out here in lockup. He wouldn't even let me give the basis for the continuance.
This judge had no interest in justice or hearing what Herb had to say.
From the time that the judge came in to the courtroom, there was no fairness there at all.
The judge came with an obvious bias. Was not only no, but hell no to everything he had to say.
Well, the judge would not listen at all, and he said you can put any objections in at the end of the case. Well, obviously a little bit late after the fact. Well, I went, and they put on the trial that day, and I tried to handle it myself. I had a receipt. Now, for that $2,500 charge about the deposit that I'd gotten up front, well, the vice president of the bank and I had signed a statement giving credit to these people that were building the house for. We had given them credit for that, and it was signed by the vice president of the bank and myself. So I had given that piece of material or that document to the attorney. So here's this witness on the stand, and I said, could I have that document because I want to question this witness? And what do you think he says? He doesn't have it. Now here's a piece of evidence that's going to prove my innocence, and isn't it amazing? He doesn't have it at the trial. Well, at the end, I end up getting charged. One of the charges were dismissed. I was found guilty of 2 charges. The Commonwealth attorney outright lies to the jury. Again, besides the false charge he brought, he's lying to the jury on top of it.
And the smirk on William F. Neely's face throughout the proceedings indicated to all of us that he knew the outcome from the very beginning.
The judge was so upset with the outcome, because they thought they were going to put me away for a long time, he told the jury, and I've gotten the transcript, I mean, anybody's welcome to read it to this day. He says to the jury, you've given a misdemeanor penalty for a felony conviction. They thought they were going to put me away for a long time. Well, after the judge gave me the verdict, it was read, I stood, I turned around to give my wife and say so long to my wife and my kids, because they weren't even going to let me out on bond, and I was going to give my wife a kiss. The officer, they were so, I guess it's just hard to explain, put into words. The officer grabs me, wouldn't even allow me to say so long to my family. And next thing I know, I'm in the back, spread your legs, and they're putting their rubber gloves on.
Guilty as charged. Even when the law is clearly in your case, the law doesn't matter when they want you to be guilty.
A show of hands. Who thought there was justice in this courtroom today? Anybody?
No.
No.
So during that 2.5 months, what I did is I had two things in there with me. I had my scriptures. My wife got them for me. And I had them, the superintendent, of the jail where I was incarcerated, I had them bringing me in law books. So what I did is I did some study while I was there. And I had some cases still pending before the courts. And in fact, the federal cases, I recall the federal case was still pending and so on. So what I did is I studied law, and they would have to, and while these cases are going on, they would have to come to pick me up at the regional jail. I would put my suit on and go into court to represent myself against these officials and so on. Eventually, I finally got a settlement from the Spotswood Construction Company, or Spotswood Construction Loans, I should say. I got a small settlement from them, and in the process, I had ended up taking that case. It had started U.S. bankruptcy court. I had taken it from the U.S. bankruptcy court to the U.S. I think it was the U.S. District Court, to the Court of Appeals. I think it went back to the U.S. District Court, back to the Court of Appeals, and then I ended up taking it all the way to U.S. Supreme Court. So, and a lot of that was done, as I recall, when I was incarcerated. Well, after 2.5 months, I was out of jail, and I started getting involved politically, because now it's happened to me. I watched that movie I mentioned to you earlier, about that movie with Sissy Spacek about this governor selling pardons. It's one thing to watch somebody else that happened to them and their family, and I wanted to reach out at that time, and I didn't. And looking back, I really should have, because
they're getting paid for playing their games and ruining people's lives. Mr. Neely, I hate to think how many lives he's ruined. That's sad, and that's one of the reasons why I kind of feel bad that maybe I didn't take stronger action before.
These terrible things, you feel for somebody and you're going to take action, you didn't. Well, I didn't. And I'll tell you what, when it happens to yourself, it's an altogether different thing. So
I am very sad for our country if this is what's going to continue to happen.
I went to court again when things were under appeal, and they wanted me to pay restitution and to pay this individual some money and so on, and I refused. I wasn't going to pay restitution for something I didn't do. So I ended up going in and serving another 2.5 months.
And Neely has been after Herb and after Herb's family ever since.
We will not stand for this injustice over and over again.
I'm telling you, Tea Party groups, Patriot groups, John Birchers, you people need to show up in these courtrooms when someone stands up and is fighting this Goliath, trying to stand for the truth and justice. You need to be here. Today it's Herb Lux, tomorrow it's you.
There's not justice necessarily here in Spotsylvania County.
Show of hands, who thought Herb Lux got screwed?
2 hands.